Good morning and welcome to the KRUX podcast, the podcast that is supposed to take place directly after the speaker presented in the lounge at a KRUX Thursday session. And I've been trying to get to Tyler's recording forever. And we tried last week and the internet was failing, and now we're trying again this week. So I'm still very, very happy to have Pastor Tyler Helfers with us. And he did a talk on a very special relationship that he has with his father. And he showed us a little bit of his background and his life. So I'm very glad to at least have a follow-up conversation with Tyler on the topic. Like I say, every time it is to catch up the people who couldn't be in the lounge, but really it's just selfish me wanting to spend more time with the speakers, especially when they were as interesting and engaging as Tyler was. So Tyler, welcome to the KRUX podcast. Thank you for your time so that we can do this.
No, thanks for having me, and glad to chat further.
Thank you. Tyler, last night we had Thanksgiving, and as the only Americans in the room, technically you were the only ones who legitimately could be celebrating Thanksgiving, but it's just been such a pleasure at KRUX to co-opt the holiday and be able to get together with friends and family to share a meal. And it was such a exciting moment to also finally meet your wife and your daughters. So yes, I'm sure people pick up on your American accent. They're already thinking, whoa, what's this American doing in South Africa? What did he do at a KRUX Thursday? How did he end up in the lounge? So what is your background? Why are you in South Africa? Why are you in Stellenbosch? How did you find KRUX? Who are you, sir? And how did we get to meet you? And what are you busy with?
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you got to meet the rest of my family. So that was special for me to be able to invite them and have them be able to come. So that was good. But why are we here? The short story is that we received a call to serve a church. So I'm the pastor at Stellenbosch International Fellowship. It's a small international congregation here, really in the heart of Stellenbosch. So we're really close to the university. And that's always been at the heart of who we serve. We serve students, staff, particularly international students and staff, a lot of postgraduate students, their families. But we also have a number of local folks as well, and really seek to be a global family for people here, and an opportunity for them, a space and a place for them to worship. We're an English service. And so I received a call from this congregation to come back. We were here in 2021 for a short visit. And so we've been here almost a year now, where I've been pastoring at this church, and busy with that. I'm busy with raising, we have 2 daughters. Enjoying life here, trying to be outdoors. And in terms of KRUX, it's in the sort of that spot of one of the things I enjoy, which is connecting the Christian faith to all sort of facets of life, right? So arts and sciences and culture and politics and all these sort of things. So it was a natural space that JB invited me to come and visit, and was glad to, and sort of grown from there.
It's such a pleasure having you in the community. We're always looking, so rich when they are formally trained theologians, just always keeping us on track, especially when we start talking about the softer, just culture and philosophy, and then to bring us back to really good, solid theology. So thank you so much for also helping us in that regard. It's really, really nice to have some professional theologians in the community and not just dabblers. Your presentation then took the format of such an eloquent essay, and Tyler, your writing is so, so beautiful. I really do invite you to also write for the KRUX blog. I'd love to read more of your writing. I don't know if you write for a hobby, maybe a novelist, but you should pursue that hard. Your writing is so beautiful. And then you set it up in these different parts to take us through this conversation or a series of conversations that you had with your father. And then the first one you entitled Creation. And you started your talk, that was your opening sentence, and your father says, okay, but then what are your beliefs regarding sex and sexuality? You were much younger when you were asked this. And I was wondering now that you're older and have also grown in the faith and grown in interpersonal relationship ability, your EQ, I wonder if you think back how you responded, if you were satisfied with the way you responded, and in retrospect, if you would have changed anything. Would you still have given the same answer? How satisfied do you think you are with how that conversation went?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, I would say the same things today. I still hold to a historic sexual ethic from Scripture, and but I think what I would emphasize more, which were there at the time, but yeah, that was about not quite 15 years ago, about 13 years. I think what I would emphasize today is, the goodness of our bodies, that even in a fallen world, the elements of the goodness that is still there, that that we can embrace, but also the goodness of sex, the goodness of marriage, and what these emphasize. And then also, and I did bring this up in my talk, but really leaning into that sense of inclusion, right? That I am just as broken in my body and in my sexuality as anyone else. And so to sort of come alongside and to enter into that space in this context with my father. And so that was present then, but I think drawing that out more and allowing more space for that. Those would be a couple of the things that I'd probably, looking back, want to do more of. But I am very thankful for when those conversations took place, after I had more time to reflect, to think on things, to wrestle with what I believed and why I believed it, before sort of being challenged or invited to have those conversations with him.
Yeah, this year at KRUX, we really spent time thinking about what it means to be embodied and to have a body and to use your body to interact with creation. So it's really been, I never formally gave the keynote or the theme for the KRUX talks for the year. And I loved how from different angles, all of the different speakers just brought their stories or whatever they were interested in that week. And it always came back to this year, especially our relationship with our bodies. And it's one of my favorite things about our faith is just how physical it is. You know, we have the baptism, and we have the water, and we have communion, and we have bread, and Christ is always there in the mud and the dust, and he's always, touching plants, and so embodied, touching human beings. That was it. I think it was a brave topic too, for you to approach. We very rarely really speak about sexuality. We very rarely get the opportunity. So I'm so glad that you also brought that aspect. And I hope in the future, we can explore that even more. So thank you for giving that opportunity for a topic we don't actually speak about a lot at KRUX.
And I think part of why it's sort of a circular thing, that it's difficult to talk about, and so we don't. But then that also means that our conversations then are often not too good when we do talk about it. And if the church wants to have a meaningful sort of ministry to and to come alongside and to love and serve people well, we have to be able to talk about it. And so yes, I agree. I hope that we're able to have more conversations.
Yeah, definitely in a student town like Stellenbosch too. It's filled with Gen Z Zoomers who, mostly unchurched, have grown up with such a different understanding of the purpose of the body. And then, like you say, if there's so few people or organizations that want to go near that topic, especially with Zoomers, and then it does become a self-fulfilling prophecy, is, the church has no opinion because the church is too scared to have an opinion. So we traverse the culture. That's what KRUX is for. The second part then of your conversation, you labeled redemption. And like I said last time, one of my favorite parts of KRUX is how we get to see the background of our visitors and our members, because you'd see the same face every Thursday for a year. And even though we make small talk around a cup of coffee, it's not that I ever would have learned things about your history unless, you had took this opportunity to just come talk to us about your life. I was so fascinated about a background in criminology that you initially started with. And I've been struggling to find the words, but I feel this poetic something that makes you so special, in that you started with criminology and then you moved over to theology, and experience you as a person that so easily extends grace and forgiveness. And so there's something there that I wish I could eloquently express, but how do you make sense of how your story has progressed, how you've gone from studying guilt and punishment, and then moving on to study grace and forgiveness and bringing them together? How do you reconcile these in your calling?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, actually started even before criminology. I wanted to do screenwriting. So you mentioned about writing, and I have always enjoyed writing. But as I was exploring sort of what it would look like to study and what working in screenwriting would look like, I began to realize, much as many people do in a number of career fields, that as much as it's as much about the connections as it is the content and the quality of your work. And so I began to wonder if that was the best plan to go down that route. And what it led to was thinking about what I enjoy writing about, which in this case, I've always had an enjoyment of detective novels, of criminal procedure, and these sort of things. And so, I finished my undergraduate degree in criminology, focused on behavioral and geographic profiling. And I think for me, sort of making that turn to theology and sort of how these all sort of hold together, I think within criminology, I'd really latched onto the way in which I wanted to see that as an avenue for pursuing justice. For as much as, there's the elements of guilt and punishment, that there's also the sense of the opportunity for reconciliation, the hope of restoration, bringing resolution and these sort of things to people's lives. And so, in terms of theology and now serving in vocational ministry, I think that emphasis on the role of pursuing justice, confronting evil with the gospel, and seeing restoration, renewal, reconciliation in people's lives, and then interpersonally as well. This is sort of where I find those intersections. On the maybe, to look at the negative side, I guess you could say that there's also that element of, you see the brokenness in our world and the need to figure out how to account for it and how to work to counter it. So those are all pieces, I think, for how I sort of hold all that together, and how I feel like they all sort of fit well together. There's a creativity, the justice, hope that's there as well. Yeah.
I think I said to you last time, but I want to say it again because it has to be on permanent record, is, I mean, with your background that is screenplay and then criminology and then theology, you are so uniquely situated to write that, I don't know, crime, mystery, novel. But then I have so much respect for somebody that can really, they understand their theology so well that they don't have to paddle with it like these ham-fisted analogies or but very, very subtle. You just pick up, wait, this novel is changing my worldview, maybe about crime, maybe about punishment. And but with your background, can you imagine a piece of work that could come out of your mind with your eloquence, your screenwriting training, your criminology training, and your theology? I'm still going to be on your case, Tyler. Like, how's that novel going? Because I will be your pre-order, your first reader for pre-order for a novel like that.
I'll start thinking through some ideas over the holidays.
Yeah, but I have such a desire to write a novel, but I so badly wanted to be full of everything that I truly believe, but you have to be so careful. We were speaking to Stephen about Christian art last night also, and Stephen just says, you just paint any old dove, and, as long as it's holding any old piece of foliage, the Christians will buy it. I don't want to write like that. So teach me how to write my worldview, but make it beautiful and subtle and yeah. So I'll let you go first, then I'll read your work, and then I'll follow your lead.
What you mentioned, it reminds me of some advice I received about writing sermons, and so the young pastor always wants to include everything in a sermon. Everything that they've sort of experienced, their thoughts about the church and what people should be doing. And they preach this one sermon where they just vomit all of this out. And then they find out that the next week they have to do it again. And they go, well, I don't have anything else to say. And I think part of it is, that simplicity, right? That you were just mentioning about not having to force things and picking up on one little thing here or there and just allowing that to sort of settle in a text. But
and especially
we'll see
when it comes to the gospel, you're so eager to get to the punchline of the gospel that you want to rush through all of the foundation building. And I'm interviewing Daniel next week about his talk, and the subtlety there again, because he started with archaeology and we started with the ancient Egyptians. And I thought we were doing an Indiana Jones. No, we're just exploring the ancient world of archaeology. And then he so slowly built up, and that's why the gospel is the only message that makes sense. And when somebody presents it like that, you have all of these historical context, and then suddenly you get the so what. So yes, it's very difficult to hold back because you're so excited to get to the punchline, but like a good joke, you need to actually just build it up slowly. So I guess that takes lots of practice. I was thinking now, like I said, Stellenbosch is such a student town, and I'm an elder millennial, so I'm already dealing with the first Zoomers coming through in my lecture halls. And even that is such a generational divide, I really feel. And when I was listening to all of the ways that you approached speaking to your father, I assume your dad is maybe a boomer. I doubt he's old enough to be greatest generation. So and it's a different world that the boomers inhabited. They had such completely different definitions for sin, completely different orientation towards stigma and taboo, which within the context of who you are speaking to, if you understand their worldview, you understand what would hurt them more than any other generation, and obviously that will inform your conversation. So because I'm trying to learn from how you spoke to your father, how I can also try and approach these conversations. So I don't feel like I know if I had to speak to a boomer, what approach would I take? But now I understand. And I don't even know where to begin speaking to a Gen Z about shame. I find not only disgust in them to admit that shame, sin even exists, but even if something is shameful, it's so subjective. Who am I to say that anything isn't just a choice? So I wonder, in your years in fostering in Stellenbosch, do you have any advice for that approach? You know, how would the conversation differ about sin, behavior, choices to how you spoke to your father, and how you spoke to a Gen Z in your congregation, and where do we even begin to talk about sin to a world where no one is ever wrong, everybody's just oppressed or struggling or sick or mental health issues, or how do we begin even thinking about sex, talking about sex to a well, not just sex, but these intimate things that, how do we even begin to talk to that generation about these things?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one comment I would make is that I think some of this is determined by how influenced or what the influences are in terms of people. So, for instance, a lot of the people still involved in our church and ministry here are coming from other countries on the continent, have, I think, a greater degree of collectivist sort of cultural background and assumptions. A number of people, that have a lot of sort of traditional religious influences on their lives. And that shapes them differently than more Western oriented, sort of individualist, sort of influenced people, particularly students. So that's one thing I sort of recognize in terms of my ministry here, is that I sort of have a very diverse group that I'm engaging all the way from, that one end of the spectrum to the other. And I think within it, a key question that zooms out maybe more, right? So it's not so focused on one particular thing, but it's grappling with that question of how we account for sin, for brokenness, for whether you want to say evil in the world, or those things, right, that as subjective as they can be, it's interesting when you begin to have conversation, the number of things that people will still objectively sort of state as if they're absolutes. And so they'll apply those and say, this is wrong, or this is good, or this is bad. And so how you account for those things that people will sort of claim as bad or wrong, whether it's individually within our life or within the world, whether a war, addiction, broken families, the problems I experienced, even those issues of not in terms of from a moral sense of good and bad, right or wrong, but the fact that we have to deal and grapple with issues around mental health and our physical bodies, death itself. And I think that within that, as Christians, we can have a degree of confidence and also just consistency or coherence. And we have a way of accounting for sort of the universal misery that we experience on a personal level, but also, interpersonally, cosmically. And I think inviting people to sort of enter into that space and wrestle with the question of where do these things come from, and what is that? And as much as there's that piece, I think in some ways shame and fear are also avenues for entering into conversation. So to separate shame from guilt, that people don't necessarily feel guilt for actions they don't see as wrong, but there is, I think, an intense concern about feeling that we're going to find ourselves excluded, isolated, or put on the outside, right? To be canceled. That there is, and these are all related to shame, and how the broader community, my peers, or a city, in our day, the blog, we would have said, as good millennials, we would have said the blogosphere. But now, other avenues of social media, that fear of perception and how that affects your reputation. So I think investigating what shame means and how that plays out and how that intersects with, as a Christian, the work of Christ. Many of the stories of the Bible are about Jesus entering into a shameful situation and restoring honor, restoring someone's status within the community, and bringing a sort of harmony back to a place or people. And then I think also that issue of fear, whether that's spiritual or related to shame or other aspects of life, right? Fear of death, fear of failure, that the fears are often those areas where there are absolutes about brokenness and the effects of sin. And so inviting people to enter into that and to sort of explore why do we think these things, and what do they say about not just us, but about what is true in the world and what can be done about it. So I think those are content-wise things, but I think also the context is important too in terms of the space you're creating. So I think a lot of these conversations, especially identity-oriented conversations, sexuality, politics, ethnicity, background, these sort of things, that they really will only they'll only be fruitful or meaningful within relationships of trust. So I think there's a space to say the onus is on the church to develop relationships of trust, and not instrumental or objectifying relationships, to sort of see someone as a project, but to say, I care about this person, and I'm also I care about them in a sense of I care about them, but I also care to know them, and to learn about them, to learn from them. And so, to have meaningful relationships is not only a sort of, I think in some ways, countercultural in general, but particularly as the church wants to engage in conversations about Christ and about scripture and truth, all these things, that the context of trusting relationships is important. I really like the work that one of my colleagues in the States has been really pioneering in many ways, this sense of estuary. So this sort of space in which, in nature, an estuary being this space where salt and fresh water sort of commingle, and it creates an environment where a lot of different life sort of springs up. I think that creating spaces where people feel safe and are given the clearance to sort of speak their mind, and they don't have to have a concern about shame or to fear what might come as a result of it. That breeds a new type of life, an opportunity for conversations and reflection and challenge for people of all types of what they believe and why they believe it. So I think creating more spaces like that is as crucial as the content of the conversations, because I think people will come to realize they actually hold a lot of things belief-wise that maybe they wouldn't simply state or that, we don't claim to hold until you actually have conversation about it and you realize, wow, I didn't really think about that, or never really thought that I held that belief that way. But
yeah. And I think for Christians also, what inspired me so much from Daniel's talk then, when he spoke about his freedom from moralism, is, we have to learn how to communicate beyond what's right, to grow and then be able to express not what's right, but in terms of not only is it right, but it's also good. And then to go even further and say, not only is it good, but it's beautiful. And I mean, who can resist beauty? If we just had the ability to draw out the beauty of the truth, then there wouldn't even be a need for the moralism, because you'd be just so drawn to rejecting that which destroys, or that which is ugly. But to see beauty, you have to know what you believe and why you believe it so thoroughly that you need to be living a beautiful life, yourself, be able to see the beauty in your choices yourself, and not just the moralism in your own choices, because that tends to, make you so self-righteous when you focus on the right instead of on the beautiful.
Yeah, the arena of aesthetics, and I think also systematic, or sort of larger scale understandings of sin and brokenness, can be wonderful avenues. So recognizing that it's not just, right, if you want to think of it in terms of morality or someone's behavior, it's not simply the fact that there is, we can argue about whether someone's behavior is good or bad, right or wrong. But the fact that, there are institutions and systems and structures within the world that are broken and cause harm for communities, for countries, for groups of people, so finding some of these touch points with where our culture is today, and being able to sort of invite them into a biblical sort of conception of that. But the aesthetics, I remember last time when we were trying to record, I mentioned a theologian who's had a significant influence on me, so J.H. Bavinck, and I mentioned his sort of writing is very, there's an aesthetic quality to it that I think was just beautiful, and I stumbled my way through a quotation of his. So I prepared myself, and I actually found the actual quotation. Do it justice. But he writes this and talking about this, the significance of the work of Christ. And I think that what he says is really significant even today. And this was written mid 20th century, so in the 50s, early 60s. He writes, the person and work of Jesus serves as proof that God will not surrender this terrible world to the powers of decay at work in it, but that the great day in which he himself will gather up his world into a harmonious symphony of adoration has already begun. Mm-hmm. So these images of decay, restoration, of dissonance musically, and harmony. Just think about they're beautiful, and they convey some of that beauty that you were talking about.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's why the arts is such a significant pillar for KRUX, and why the artist sub-community in our community is so important for us. Because I have no arts background. I come completely with the scientific worldview and the physics and the computer science, and because we are trying to reach the world aesthetically with whatever message, whatever truth we have, that's why we protect our artists, because those are our vehicles that we hope the gospel to go out from KRUX through the arts into the world. So our artist members are very, very valuable. So I'm so grateful to be a member of KRUX, where I get to be exposed by people who have such an enormous aesthetic vocabulary, I didn't realize it was a vocabulary on its own, that, this is how you unlock these thoughts in people. And if you show them this image, it signifies all of these. So I'm learning a lot. It's been quite a journey. I was joking with Stephen last night. He was teaching me watercolor. So I'm going to try my hand at that. And it'll be muddy blotches on the page first, but my first art piece will be Lishan's puddle of mud, and then from there, hopefully, I can also catch up with my artist friends to try and create something beautiful. Talking about having this difficult conversation with your father, I was thinking about how we all eventually do lose our fathers, not necessarily physically to death, but in all of our growing up years, there's this moment where the disillusionment sets in, and you realize that this man that's been the most aspirational person in your life is just another human being. Sometimes the relationship gets damaged much younger, like in your case. Sometimes it's the first time that you have to put your elderly father, ask him, if you can help him towards an assisted living. But the pain of that, I'm seeing a couple of my friends going through that, where their parents are now asking them to make the financial decisions for the family, or for the first time. You realize you still feel like a kid, and then suddenly your father asks you for advice. And I don't think we completely acknowledge enough how shockingly painful that day is, the first day your father asks you for advice. And it's such a loss. So, yeah, I guess I was just wondering about your own journey with dealing with disillusionment and disappointment, and at such a young age becoming an adult yourself, becoming the even for just a little bit, the most aspirational male that is right now just yourself. How did you deal with this pain, and what comfort do you have for anyone that's losing their father, whether physically or just emotionally or just to the passage of time? Where can we find comfort for the incredible pain of losing our fathers?
Well, the very first thing that I think of is question and answer 1 of the Heidelberg Catechism, in which the question says, "What is our only comfort in life and in death?" And it says that I am not my own, but belong in body and soul, in life and in death, to my faithful Savior, Jesus Christ. To know that I belong to Christ and am a part of the family of God, and have a heavenly Father who is not only almighty and powerful, but a loving and faithful Father, I think is incredibly significant. And I tell people that I'm a very passionate person about catechism, and I tell them, you learn these things not for that moment, but you learn them in advance for when down the line they become important for you. So for me, actually, I hadn't learned those things yet when these moments came about for me. And so I think to begin with, there was a bit of detachment. I just sort of took myself away from the situation, from that relationship, from sort of, how I was thinking about all of this. But over time, I realized that it wasn't the end of things. It's easy to sort of, with a lot of situations in life, to sort of and I don't mean this in a condescending way, but in an sort of an over dramatic sense, to sort of exalt something's importance or significance in terms of our lives. And so I think for a while, I just sort of saw this as this is the end in some ways. And I didn't recognize that it meant that there was an opportunity for something different or something new. And so I think, if I was to talk to someone who is dealing with a similar situation or just their own situation of coming to grips with this change and the realization, it would be to emphasize the element of belonging to God in Christ. And then also that there will be difficulty, that there's always uncertainty and transition and sort of, in a sense, groping in the dark as you make your way, but that there is opportunity for something new, something different. So for me, that took the shape of, I want to intentionally invest myself in what this relationship could be. And that I have, in a different way than a father and son or a parent and child, in a different way, I have the opportunity to be a part of shaping that relationship and what this could look like. And that became very hopeful for me, because now, this could be a meaningful relationship in ways that it had never been before. I had never been particularly close to my father because my parents divorced at such a young age, and I didn't see him a lot, every other weekend, on certain holidays. And so some of that aspirational sort of looking up to and elements of that relationship, if I reflected on it, I'm sure I would find them there. But as I think, it's like, I don't know that I really had that, but there was most definitely that break and change in the relationship when he opened up and shared things with me, or then began to ask me questions, not as a son and not as, a family relationship, but as, you are another just person, and I'm seeking your wisdom, your knowledge, and your help in how I'm wrestling with and processing these things.
Yeah, fatherlessness is such a massive topic in South Africa. It is socially one of the biggest problems that we somehow have to find out how to address. And it's got a long history. It's a lot to do with a culture that was created when migrant work was a big thing, and the men had to leave their homes and travel very far for employment. And it's kind of now it's a cultural artifact, where it's low expectations of fathers, just breed low expectations of fathers. And the last time I looked at the stats, 80% of our babies that were born last year, the page for the father was just left blank when the babies are registered for their birth certificates. 80%, just the mothers are, I don't know, and it actually doesn't even matter. I guess I'll figure it out myself. And when I did Rolf's interview for his podcast, when Rolf was talking about masculinity, he also said if somebody offers him R1 million or they offer him regular access to an elder that will not manipulate him for personal gain and just exists to help him grow as a man in wisdom, he'll take that elder every time over any asset that you can give him. But to actually find an elder, because even our rich families, you might not suffer physical fatherlessness, to find a father that has become a man, not just a boy in an old man's body, that can actually offer you that wisdom. So I was wondering whether you were able to find a mentor, somebody to look up to as a teenager or as a young adult, and serving in a church in South Africa with this massive problem. Where do our fatherless children go? What is the church to do? Can the church play a role here? What is the church's answer to the orphaned, either physically or emotionally orphaned?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. For myself, I have been incredibly blessed by a number of mentors. So, to begin with, my mother remarried when I was 7. And I think I drew inspiration from seeing the work ethic, the dedication of my stepfather, not only to us as a family, but that he put in long hours. He worked shift work for a long time, and seeing just the way in which he did that, I think has had a significant impact on my own sense of work, working hard. It manifests and expresses a little bit differently in my life than his, but it's definitely there. But I had actually one of the things I love about our wedding pictures, my wife Christina and I. When you get married, you often have your best friends as sort of your bridesmaids and your groomsmen. And so I had in our wedding pictures, one of the things I love is that for both Christina and I, it's several of our good friends from university, one of her good friends from high school, and then it's a mentor that she had at university, who was just a little bit older than all of us. But then on my side, I have this, in the midst of these university students, this 40-something-year-old man who was a mentor for me when I came to faith in grade 10. He would take me for dinner on an occasion, get a sandwich, grab coffee, chat, to sort of ask questions. And so throughout, really, then from that point, I can name Mike and Nate and Kyle, Mark, Tom, John, all these guys, some of them in pastoral ministry, some of them in parachurch ministry, or just guys in our church, having meaningful conversation and time together. I think of, this guy who was a retired architect from the university, and we'd get together just for coffee and conversation. And that was a blessing to me. I know it was to him as well, but having those role models and those people engaged in different areas of life, all had a shaping and influence on me in my sort of formation. In terms of the church, I think that there's an incredible opportunity. It's just a matter of being able to shape the church's, I think, mind for sort of leaning into that opportunity. So I really grieve. I think it's well intended, but I really grieve the sort of consumer oriented approach the church has taken to sort of split everyone up by generations and say, we'll have the traditional service for the old folks. We'll have the contemporary service for young people. And we'll give the youth group, we'll take them out of the service and have them go do their own thing because they don't want to be in with the rest of the adults. And so I think moving away from that sort of consumeristic model, and really embracing a covenantal, multi-generational way of being and doing church together. And I think within that, really encouraging and equipping adults, but particularly men, because I think, it may not be across the board, but I think younger women there's a greater sense that they'll seek someone out for a relationship, for question, for conversation. But even long term, I think that's a need for women as well, of helping instill that long-term sort of relationship within the church between generations, but particularly for men, to have them feel confident and equipped to just come alongside and to do life with someone younger, to take along a student from the university or from a teenager to it could just be going to run errands. It could be to exercise together, to go hiking, to go to sporting events, to read the Bible together. I'm planning again in 2024 to run a course called One-to-One Bible Reading, where it's just a seminar and we talk about what does it look like to read the Bible one-on-one with someone, and how to make that accessible and a very low pressure sort of thing to do, and the ways that that can cultivate relationship, trust, and mutual growth or edification for people in the church. And so I think that, there's wonderful opportunities for the church. And in fact, it's always been a part of the church historically, that care for orphans and widows and the needy. And so sort of capturing that and see that it's not as threatening as maybe people think it is, that it's, that it's an element of hospitality even to your home, into your life, whether that's, actually your physical home or not. But for people, it's an act of hospitality to invite someone to enter into your space, wherever and whatever that might look like. But it's something we're called to, and it's something that we're capable of. So I think that all of these are sort of opportunities for the church, but it's a matter of casting that sort of vision for shaping the church to see things this way. And I don't know, I'm hopeful, but I'm also concerned when I see the ways in which churches sort of talk about what they do and why they do it, and the ways that that plays out. I think it allows a lot of people to fall through the cracks, that particularly around this issue of mentorship and relationship.
I love that you express it in terms of hospitality. One of the internet memes that go viral like once a month is this silly thing where people say, I'm sure glad I went to school and learned how to calculate the angle on a geometric shape instead of learning how to change a tire, or how to apply for e-filing for my tax, or how to invest money. And every time I'm screaming at the screen, why are you expecting the state to teach you things that your father should be teaching you? School is not for teaching you how to change a tire. You should have a dad for that. School is not for teaching you how to. Where is your father? And especially in this country where I'm teaching first generation, second years, first generation, third years who are starting to apply for jobs. And that hospitality, the things that I've learned from my father that I didn't even realize I was picking up just from watching him or listening to him speak to a friend over the phone, and he'll talk about this investment or that opportunity, and and if you don't have access to that, you don't realize that where the heck must you learn about tax if no one around you is ever talking about, you've never heard the words e-filing. So I love that. Just invite into the home, invite on a weekend away or something, and just see what comes up in the car naturally. It's not like you have to go prepare a lecture on how to set a budget, but you probably will, say, oh, no, we can't afford that this month, honey, next month's budget will allow for that. And so I love that phrase in terms of hospitality, because I think that that'll also temper our desire for increased state. I'm very concerned about how we're constantly outsourcing all of these things that should come from your father, as now we demand it must come from the state. And politically, that stresses me out so much, how much, a government powerful enough to teach you how to change a tire is a government powerful enough to very, very easily destroy your life. So, I love that. I love that you phrase it in terms of the hospitality angle. Another interesting thing that I learned about you, I don't think you mentioned it in the talk, but JB was actually telling me about, I didn't know that you were such a proficient wrestler, and that, you were such a good wrestler at varsity. And so that was really interesting. And then my mind went all over the place. Because I did get that out of your talk, the way that you phrased it in terms of the conversations, and you kept coming back, and then it would get difficult, and especially towards the end of your talk, when your father would get angry, we would get frustrated, and you have to decide to go back. And I completely saw the I guess the gentleness that I've come to know you as such a disciplined and gentle person. I should have known there was a martial art somewhere in your past. Only people with martial arts training usually come across as so disciplined. So I should have known. And then I was just thinking about this, wrestling in real life and then wrestling with our fathers. And for those of us who really do have difficult relationships with our dads right now, do you have any lessons from your physical wrestling years that you've learned your strategy for a spar? How did you know as a wrestler when to hold on and when to tap out? When did you know how to go for another round or to call it before you get injured? And how is there anything from wrestling that you can teach me that I can translate into a relationship with my father? How do I know when to push and when to pull back, and not so that I go home with a broken hip like Jacob wrestling with the angel, but maybe I should go until my hip breaks. How can I think about wrestling and relationship with my father, for example?
I think one thing is, before you even engage, that you recognize you're engaging in something that's a long, right? You're playing the long game. So there's an element of perseverance, right? Whether that's you're out on a long run in training, you're running hills, or if you're, having, what we would call a combat session. So, there's a certain timer for a number of minutes, and you're just constantly battling with one another. But I can't do everything in 2 minutes. That this is a long-term battle, or test. And I think test might be a better word for it. So that's one piece. And I think also that you have to grow in your ability to, you're just being well attuned to your emotions, to your feelings, right? I can't have control over them until I'm aware of them and can sort of to name them, right? And so one of the phrases that I always remember my coaches telling me was controlled aggression, right? So with a combat sport, there's this need for it, there's an aggressiveness to it. But if you don't control it, it's going to get you into trouble. Either you're going to break the rules or you're probably going to make mistakes. And so if I just rush into things in life without, tempering sort of tempering have a sense of temper, where my temperament and how I'm feeling at that moment of entering in. If I just rush in, I'm more than likely going to make more mistakes than I would otherwise. Being able to be aware of and identify those emotions and feelings, to control them. I think also having a goal in mind. I think even if you're not a serious, elite level athlete or high performance sort of arena, that even people who engage in sport for recreation or leisure, that's their goal, right? I want to have fun. I want to be healthy. And for myself, I had to have goals that I was aiming for. If you don't aim for anything, it's so much easier to sort of give up. It's so much easier to allow your expectations or your work ethic, your drive to sort of sink. And I think having set goals of what I intend from a relationship, what I intend from whatever intentional action I'm going to engage in is important. And I think just also sort of, you brought up Jacob and his hip. I think on the one hand, recognizing that there will be injuries. I think about, I don't know what I'm going to be like in 20 years, but I think about concussions that I've had, a few broken
Oh,
bones,
really?
and different things. And you know, you don't go into it, or I should say, I never thought, no, I'm not going to wrestle because what if I have an injury? It was, I just did it, and occasionally injuries happened. And so I think the reality is that in any relationships, there's going to be moments where there's confusion, moments where there's offense or pain, because we are broken people. We make mistakes. We fail to really fully recognize someone and what's going on in their life and situations. We are messy. And so I think recognizing that there will be injuries that come along, but also that, again, those don't have to be the end of things. But they may even provide us with new opportunities or insights into the relationship, or what's going on in that relationship that previously we didn't know or couldn't have spoken to or thought of. So to tie this up into my relationship with my father, the fact that I walked this road alongside him and we had that relationship further on in life, and I talked about this a little bit in my talk, it gave me not only that sense of empathy and understanding and recognition of some of the things that students and people in our churches, that when they would come to me, it allowed me to relate to them better, but it also gave me a degree of credibility that I wouldn't have had otherwise. It wasn't as if I couldn't speak to these things from a theological, biblical truth sort of angle, but there was a relational, there was a lived sort of experiential side to it that simply enriched my perspective and my sort of advice or feedback to someone. And that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have had that difficult relationship, and the good and the bad and the ugly that sort of came out at different times. And so I think in the same way, that with any relationship or with wrestling, that setbacks, that injuries, struggles, when things get really hard, those may be opportunities for to come back in the future in ways that we wouldn't have expected, and enable us to come alongside people, to love, to serve, to speak into things in ways that we have been able to.
Yeah, again, that's, the body physically playing out what is happening in the relationship. Existence, man. What a trip. There's just everything's connected. Tyler, so it's been such a privilege to get to know you. Like this absolute depth of the screenwriting semi-pro wrestler who was nearly an FBI agent and is now a theologian in Africa. I mean, what a story. It's been so nice to get to know you. Thank you for your patience with all of these re-recordings and things. If anybody wants to visit your church, where can they find out more about where they could go or what times?
Yeah, so if you look for us online, you can check out our website. That's www.sif.squarespace.com. If you also just search Stellenbosch International Fellowship, you should find us. I should probably check that again sometime soon just to confirm that's the case. But you can find information there about things we have going on when our services are. So we have a morning service at 10 a.m. that meets at Makena on Rinnefeld, so right near the campus. And then you asked earlier, you just mentioned earlier about my writing. I do have a blog that I sort of semi-regularly keep up on. But I've had a few things since being here, and that's if you just search brevity and clarity.wordpress, you'd find that. But yeah, we're glad to have people come and visit the church. You're likely to hear us singing in 2 or 3 different languages on any given Sunday. And we always share a meal together afterwards.
Amazing.
So yeah, we're glad to welcome new people and for them to be a part of our community here.
Amazing. And if anybody stumbles on this podcast and they have no idea what we're talking about, KRUX is a community in Stellenbosch of artists and philosophers and cultural analysts and nerds and sportsmen and filmmakers. We get together and we just discuss life and vocation and our questions. And if anybody wants more information about KRUX, you can visit krux.africa, or you can email me, vision@krux.africa. We're on Instagram. I think that's the only social media site we're on. And yeah, so please come visit us in the lounge. And then Tyler, I will definitely see you in the lounge. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Yes, most definitely. Thank you for having me. So it's a pleasure.